As parents, it's natural for us to want to protect our kids,
Yeah.
but sometimes giving them the freedom to make their own decisions and sometimes to fail
Yeah.
helps them to learn the decision-making skills
Mm,
that they'll need to thrive. Giving them the opportunity to have the consequences of their
yeah.
choices can give them those skills that they need as they grow.
So in this video, go with us as we talk about practical tips and guidelines to watch your kids grow and become mature adults. So avoiding us being helicopter parents. We don't want to do that. So go with us as we talk a little bit about that so that you can avoid being helicopter parents over your children.
So first of all, why is it important to teach our kids to make good decisions? Or not just make good decisions, but those skills
Mm.
of making good decisions?
Well, because we don't want losers coming out of our house.
Yep, that's why.
We don't want to create failures before they go away from here.
Yeah. So the decision making process is just that. It's not
Yeah.
like I think as parents, sometimes it's easier for us to be so focused on the outcome,
Yeah,
like
that's
the
the
decision,
decision. Yep, yep.
rather than the process that it took.
And so they're growing up and they're learning how to do again, not the process, not just the outcome. I mean, it'd be easy for us just to tell our kids what to do and what not to do, but that doesn't teach them practical steps on how to actually make the good decision. So again, kind of critical thinking, decision making, consequences for their decisions that they make. So those kinds of things. I mean, it's key to make sure that your children are learning those steps and that you're not and I'm not hovering over them.
Right. Well, I think about when you were saying that about like teaching them to make the decisions that oftentimes as parents, we can see the decision that should be made.
Yeah.
And we can see that if you don't do these things,
The,
these will be the
the consequences.
consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we want to shelter them. We want to hurry things along at times. Right?
Well, we want to protect them from actually some kind of pain or some
Mhm.
hurt or some the consequences for a decision. But when it comes down to it, we really want to teach them how
Yeah,
to avoid or to critically think through the process
right.
so they know, oh, this is a better decision for us.
Yes. Well, and I think too, as a mom, I don't know, this may be a mom thing, but sometimes it's inconvenient to let your kids make a decision because it's slower.
So true.
Because you're
Let's go. Let's
thinking,
go.
we've got a timeline,
Yeah.
we've got things we need to go to. If you don't take your Chromebook to school, then
Ah,
we don't have time to go back and get it, or for you to do the
well,
English
that's because
project you were supposed to
it
do.
becomes inconvenient for you.
Mhm.
But then there's, again, teaching them. Yeah, it's going to be inconvenient, but it's also a tip for them to learn from.
Yeah. So I think that, that's one of the big things that I've thought through is, like, as a mom, I've gotta be a little bit inconvenienced for now, because in the future, it hopefully, as the kids develop those decision-making skills, then there are less inconveniences.
So could you say this a different way, maybe? Maybe having a little bit more patience is kind of, would
Yeah.
you say that's part of that
Yeah, yeah, as a
as a
parent.
parent?
I'm convinced actually
What are you
the
convinced
longer
of?
the longer that I've been a parent, that God uses it
Mm,
to
so
perfect
true.
us.
Yeah,
Like,
so true.
I mean, hopefully we're having an impact on them, and I mean, that's our prayer. But I think oftentimes God's like, you could really grow
You could grow right
in
here.
this
You
area.
might need some help right here.
So
Someone let this be a teaching tool for you.
I'm gonna use the people you love the
Here
most.
we are telling others the things we did, which we are doing. We are
Mhm.
walking through it. But we're learning as well as we go through it. So I
Absolutely.
agree with part of that. So
Absolutely. But don't you think that like, a big part of this is not being a helicopter parent, not solving
not
all
salt. Yeah,
problems
yeah,
for our
yeah.
kids,
Absolutely, absolutely.
which can be hard at times because we love them so much, and we don't want them to be in pain. We don't want them to have consequences.
Well, so for me, okay, so as a father, sometimes I just want the job done right, and I can get a little rushed in teaching, especially my son, how to do the job right, which he wants to learn to do it right. He doesn't want to not do it right, but if I just take the tool from him and I just go do it, because kind of like your example of saying, I kind of don't want it to be inconvenienced time wise, you could just go get it done yourself. But then walking them through the process, teaching them how to do it and being patient with the process. I didn't learn the first time I tried it. And so
Right.
it's very critical to be able to teach that and then have them learn
Mhm.
from that.
Right. So I think, as we're talking about this decision-making
Mm,
skills, it's gotta be age appropriate.
absolutely. I mean,
So we're not talking when they were little, they got to decide their bedtime or a
no,
curfew.
no.
None of those things. Like, when we talk about decision making and giving them freedom, it's freedom within
Boundaries,
boundaries.
exactly, yeah.
So
And like you said, age appropriate, letting them have,
mhm,
decisions that we know the ultimate outcome, especially when they're younger.
yeah,
The ultimate outcome is gonna be one way or the other, they're going to bed. I mean, we let
right.
them make a decision, but it's still within those boundaries. Now, as they're getting older, as they're becoming younger or older young adults, how do you say that? Um,
Older young adults.
yeah, there you go. Um, as they are going through that, we are allowing them to make a
Mhm.
decision on their bedtime to a certain degree.
So, one of the things bedtime is a easy one because the consequences aren't, they're not that big.
Catastrophic. They're not
Right,
catastrophic.
right, but it's a good time to teach those decision-making skills because, we kind of have built-in just natural consequences. So, we give our kids, "This is the time you have to be in your room." It's not a bedtime, you don't have to be in bed at that
Yeah.
time, but you do have to be in your room because the household is shutting down,
Yep.
because we, have to get up, get prepared for the morning. But do they have to go to bed at that time? No.
No, but what's gonna happen if they don't go to bed at a decent time? They're gonna be waking up
Mhm.
with a consequence of being tired.
Being tired and not being able
Mm,
to just act however they want
yeah.
because they are tired.
True, because we've had that on the morning side of it
Oh, yeah,
after a
we all
circumstance. So,
struggle with
yeah.
that. I mean, who likes a morning when you wake up and you're tired?
Yeah.
No
No one.
one. But you can't just act however you want. So, um, our kids know that they don't have to go to bed at that certain time,
Nope.
but that, if they get up late, then there is a natural consequence for that. So we have implemented a consequence
Yep.
if they get up late. And there's no, like, getting late to school, there's no ride if you are late to school.
There is no ride. You're not coming back.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're not making up for it. We're not buying them an Uber. That's not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
So,
But I think that's a good place to you allow decision making
mhm.
that doesn't have, like you said, catastrophic
Catastrophic
consequences.
consequences.
They're not, so those consequences that are so impactful for their life, but taught that skill
Mhm.
of decision making. And as they've grown, those the freedom they've had in decision making has also grown with
Yeah,
them.
for their, again, age appropriateness.
Mhm.
So another thing that we actually put into play is actually teaching our kids, or encouraging our kids to have critical thinking and to ask or problem solve.
Yeah.
So, like, again, part of that being independent.
Yeah, that's so important, because we talked about actually a lot on the last
The episode,
episode
yep.
about teaching them to be critical thinkers. We don't want our kids to leave our home, not able to make decisions, not able to think through something and ask questions. And so, one of the things that we've put into practice with this
Mhm.
is we've become the question askers.
Yeah.
So if one of our kids is dealing with a situation, rather than telling them the answer, we ask
We're
questions.
flipping the script and asking them the questions. What do you think about that? What do you think the outcome would be in this scenario? Allowing them to be able to start understanding, like, oh, I could ask questions and they're processing answers, but
Mhm.
teaching themselves how to be able to ask questions for themselves. We talked a little bit about this last time about not just always being a yes person,
Right.
not just going out there and saying yes, okay, but actually, if if they have a if they've gone through these processes of learning and us asking the questions right now, and they get the understanding of how to ask the questions and what kind of questions to ask to actually process, problem solve, and get through critical thinking,
Mhm.
then they'll be able to do that when they're out in their realms of professionalism or in their relationships. So
Right.
they're able to ask the questions and or process different outcomes that could be potential on that.
Exactly. And I think that's, like, as we ask questions, we have to
Mhm.
understand that it's gonna be maybe an ongoing
Yeah,
conversation. You might not get to a decision, in that one day or in that one
it's
conversation,
a
but
process.
it may be that, you talk about it and then you leave them there, kind of with a thought, and then a few
Yeah,
days later, you bring it up, just in conversation and say, "Hey, whatever happened with this?"
yeah,
Because that just encourages them to continue to think through, like, this was the decision that was made, and then this is what happened. So to kinda tying the consequence to the decision, but asking questions is huge.
so another part of that, and it really is, if you're going to have a question or a conversation with your kids and you brought up a scenario that they're asking questions about, maybe they're wanting an answer for something, but then you respond with questions that makes them start thinking. What that also allows you to have is a dialogue with your children
Yeah.
to be able to continue a relationship with your kids.
Mhm.
And so it's not just a cut and dry, here's an answer, and then we just keep on going, but it's almost kind of really reassessing and then having open dialogue with your kids, all the while they're processing, they're learning how to
Mhm.
have critical thinking, how to problem solve. And there are going to be issues where there may just need an answer,
Yes, definitely.
but in most of what we've experienced with our kids is teaching them as that goes along
Right.
and having open dialogue and relationship with them.
Right.
And it gives them the ability to come to you as a parent and as a child, come to you and say, I've experienced this scenario. And sometimes they tell on themselves. And we're kind of like, well,
Okay.
if we hadn't had the open dialogue or the conversation and critical thinking and question asking, problem solving, then we wouldn't have that with them.
Mhm.
So,
One of the things that I just thought about as you were talking is that is where those boundaries come in.
mhm,
Because I think as parents, sometimes you think it's either or, like, you either have to make the decisions for them and give, like,
yeah,
and you have
yeah,
boundaries, or you allow them like a free for all, make all decisions for
on their own.
themselves, and we're, like, talking, like, right in the happy
And
medium.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you are allowing them decisions on certain things, age appropriate,
yep,
where there are still boundaries in place. You still have placed
boundaries.
boundaries around
Hmm.
them in specific areas, and you give freedom where you can, but then other places, they might not be old enough for freedom.
Yeah.
And so I think that's huge to understand. We are not we're not telling you that kids should make all decisions for themselves,
Mm.
because we definitely we've seen that. I mean, I think in our world, we've
We've
seen where
seen that,
kids can
and
make decisions, and that's not always the
it's not
best.
always the best.
Mhm.
You said it right, in age appropriateness,
Yeah.
right? So another tip that we would suggest is giving them the freedom to fail.
Yes, and this can be hard as parents, but we definitely have some examples of
Do
that.
we?
One that I can think of, happened several years back. Our kids were, like, in middle school, upper elementary,
Oh, okay.
that time frame, and, I was already at school, I was teaching, and I was already at school, and I got a phone call from Chris telling me that he left the kids at home, and I was thinking, "Okay, they have to be at school."
Mm,
Um, but then he went on to explain how they hadn't gotten ready. He had told them to get ready
yep.
for school, and they hadn't gotten ready. They were, off task, they were arguing, and so he had left them.
Yeah, I left.
And
I drove away.
yeah, he drove away.
I went and got gas because I needed to fill my tank up with gasoline, and so that's about a 10 to 15-minute time.
Right,
I
right.
knew with that, I would have some enough time to get back home and get them, but
But he also knew that in the meantime, they were gonna be thinking, "What on earth do we do?" Because he's our ride to school. And so, then not too long after that, I
I
get
was
a
gonna
phone call from
say,
our neighbor.
so they were let me what did we just talk about? Critical thinking, problem
Yeah.
solving? So
Yeah.
here we go. This is a perfect example. This literally rides right into this. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so our neighbor who, is super sweet,
Sweet.
and she just said, "I've got 3 kiddos here who, are completely ready to go to school."
And they're not in a disagreement with each
Nope.
other. They are all on good terms and they are just ready to go to school.
Yes, and the funny part is she didn't know the story, so I don't know if they explained it to her or just
Oh,
her
no
being a
doubt.
parent,
No doubt. They just blah, 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 blah.
but she's also a parent of kids the same age,
Mhm.
so,
Yep.
I'm sure she's had the very same conversations. But it was a good place where they were allowed to fail. They thought, "We have this consequence. How are we gonna get to school?" And,
I will tell you, it was one of the sweetest car rides to the school
I'm
that
sure
day. I mean, they were
they were
perfect.
thankful for a
They were
ride.
thankful, yes. But, we laugh about it now, but it really was, again, a scenario or a situation where we allowed them to fail. Now, with parameters, knowing what
Mhm.
the consequences were gonna be and knowing that we were gonna resolve the issue, but it allowed them to know at this point, wow, we really need to figure this stuff out. So, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I think the good part about it is we knew, the kids are safe.
Yeah, we did know that.
We knew that the consequence wasn't too detrimental
Yeah,
for them, but that at the same time, it was a consequence.
yeah,
And, so allowing kids to fail in the minor things hopefully prevents, those actions
later.
later.
Yeah.
That there's failure, but it really is, a little more major. It affects more things.
Kudos to having some good neighbors right next door
Shout
to
out
help. Yeah,
to
shout out
good
to them.
neighbors.
Awesome. Yeah. But no, really. And we joke around it about that right now, but we really did use that as a teaching tool for them. And so it really is a good thing to allow them to, with parameters, fail.
Yes. So our final thing on decision making is, being a guide. We encourage
Yeah.
you to be a guide. We try to be guides for our kids and not helicopter parents. It's easier as parents to be helicopters
Yeah.
because we want to protect them.
Because you want to keep them from, again, feeling pain or hurt or
Mhm.
even consequences in some cases. But
Right,
it's very critical to allow them to be, or for us to be a guide for them to be able to first not just let them fail and then just it be an utter failure, but also kind of allowing them to have confidence or build confidence in themselves.
right.
You know,
Yeah, uh, decision making, whether you learn from it or it was a good decision, does build that
it does.
confidence
Yeah.
for decisions later on.
Hmm. Yeah.
which we've talked about. We're always thinking, or we're always trying to think about that next step. And so, teaching to them to be critical thinkers is, one of the big reasons
Yeah.
that we place such an emphasis on this.
So to hear more on the conversation of tips on how to build relationship with your kids, check out last week's video. It goes a little bit more in depth.